The crystal flute slipped from Vila Hart's fingers and hit the marble floor with a crack that sliced through the music. The ballroom of the Walker estate went silent. Champagne splashed across the white marble like a small golden stain on a spotless world. Under the massive chandelier, everyone in their glittering gowns and tailored suits turned to look at the woman who had just walked in. 3 years ago, Vila had walked out of this house with nothing but a suitcase and a divorce decree. Tonight, she came back in a black velvet gown that hugged every line of her body, her dark hair swept up to reveal a neck wrapped in diamonds. Her eyes were colder than the ice in the champagne buckets, and every step of her heels echoed like a countdown. On the main stage, Isabella White tightened her grip on the little boy in her arms. The child clung to her silver mermaid gown, chubby fingers digging into the fabric. His curls were neatly combed, his small suit tailored to perfection, a tiny crown badge pinned to his chest. The little prince of the Walker family, the so-called future heir. Thank you for coming to our 3rd anniversary celebration. Isabella's voice trembled for a second, then smoothed into practiced sweetness. She smiled at the crowd, dimples showing, eyes shining with the gentle glow that had fooled so many. Louis is our treasure, our miracle. He is Keller's only son and the future of Walker Group. She lifted her glass of champagne and pressed a kiss to Louis's hair. Beside her, Keller Walker stood tall in his dark suit, his expression full of pride. He was 30 now, sharper around the edges, more powerful than he had been 3 years ago, and yet his arrogance felt exactly the same. His jaw was set, his shoulders relaxed, his confidence flowing like the expensive wine in everyone's glasses. 3 years ago, Keller said, raising his glass. I divorced Vila and married Isabella. People called me cold, ruthless, insane even, but standing here now, with my wife and my son, I can say it with no regret. That decision was the best choice I ever made. The ballroom burst into polite laughter and applause. Cameras flashed. Socialites murmured compliments. Some watched Isabella with obvious envy. Others glanced at Keller with fawning admiration, hoping for business favors. Vila let the noise wash over her. Her lips curved, slow and razor-sharp. Is that right? She said. Her voice carried, clear and cool, cutting cleanly across the room. The musicians stopped playing. The chatter died. Keller froze, the glass almost to his lips. Isabella stiffened. Vila took another step forward. The black velvet gown trailed behind her like a shadow, the slit showing a flash of long, toned leg. The diamonds at her throat caught the light, but it was her eyes that drew everyone in, dark and bright with something dangerous. Vila. Keller's expression darkened. Who let you in here? The front gate was open, she said lightly. I walked in. Someone near the door swallowed. They felt the pressure in the air, like the sky before a storm. Keller forced a cold smile. This is a private event. You are not welcome here. Strange. Vila tilted her head. I seem to remember my name still on the marriage certificate once upon a time. Walker Estate used to be my home. At the very least, I should get 1 glass of champagne as a guest. She picked up a fresh flute from a passing waiter, the server's hand trembling as she did. She raised it slightly toward Keller and Isabella. To your best choice, she said. A few people laughed, uncertain. Vila took a slow sip, wiped the corner of her mouth with one graceful finger, and then dropped the bomb. Keller, she asked, every syllable soft and icy. Are you absolutely sure that Louis is really your son? The ballroom exploded. Gasps burst out on all sides. Someone choked on a drink. A woman dropped her clutch. The reporters who had been invited for publicity snapped their heads up, fingers already finding the record buttons on their phones. Isabella went white. Louis blinked and buried his face against her shoulder, sensing the sudden tension. Vila, shut up. Isabella's voice cracked, too shrill to sound gentle now. You are insane. You are jealous. How dare you curse my child like that? Vila's gaze slid past her, straight to Keller. Keller stared at her, his eyes blazing. You always loved drama, he said. This is low even for you. Drama. Vila smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You think I would come here after 3 years just to cause drama? Her eyes dropped to Louis. The boy peeked at her from Isabella's shoulder, with nervous curiosity. His eyes were a warm, familiar brown, framed by lashes that any woman would envy. Vila took another step forward, until she could see every detail of his face. I remember you once said, she murmured, looking at Keller, that if you had a son, you wanted him to have your eyes. Do you remember that? Keller frowned, irritated. What of it? These eyes, Vila said, pointing lightly with her glass, do not look like yours at all. They look very much like someone else's. Someone who has been very close to Isabella since before you remarried. She let the name fall with cruel precision. Her dear cousin Louis White. The resemblance is impressive, almost perfect. Silence flooded the ballroom, then shattered into whirling whispers. Cousin Louis? Wait, he does look like that guy. The one who always hangs around her. Is this a joke? Isabella's fingers clenched so tight around her glass that her knuckles turned white. Vila, you disgusting woman. You are slandering me and my son in front of everyone. You are jealous because Keller left you. That is all this is. Jealous? Vila met her gaze calmly. You stole my place, my family, my life. Jealousy was buried with everything I lost. What you see now is something else. She took a folded document from her clutch and flicked it through the air. It hit Keller's chest and slid down into his hand. He glanced at the title. Then at the signature at the bottom. The color drained from his face. Anonymous preliminary paternity screening. Conclusion excluded. These are copies. Vila said softly. The originals are in a safe place. Keller's fingers shook around the paper for a heartbeat, before he forced them still. This is a trick, he said through his teeth. Fabricated. You always had a talent for games. Games? Vila's brows lifted. If you think it is fake, you can always do it again. You are the all-powerful Keller Walker. Surely you are not afraid of one small test. The guests were no longer pretending not to listen. They watched Keller. They watched Isabella. They watched Louis, the supposed heir, who suddenly looked like a child standing on the edge of a cliff. Keller, please. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. She reached for his arm with her free hand. You know me. You know I would never lie to you. She is trying to destroy us. She always hated me. She cannot stand that you are happy now. Vila laughed, quiet and sharp. Happy? He has been raising someone else's son for 3 years. He thinks he has a Walker heir in his arms, when all he has is a lie. You shut up. Isabella screamed. Her voice cracked on the last word. Louis started crying, clinging to her neck. Keller's jaw flexed. He looked at his son, at the curve of his nose, the shape of his mouth, the angle of his eyes. Keller had never doubted before. Now, doubt crawled into his chest and spread like poison. Stop staring like that, Isabella whispered, panic starting to rise. Keller, listen to me. He is yours. He is your child. Vila took one last step, and stood right in front of Keller. So do it, she murmured. If you are so sure, prove it. Or admit that you are afraid of the answer. Keller's pride snapped. Fine, he said, voice low and dangerous. We will do it. A proper test. No more whispers. No more rumors. No more anonymous reports. He turned to the crowd, his expression stony. In 1 week, we will announce the results in front of the board and the media. Until then, I will not tolerate any talk about my son. Vila smiled like she had already won. 1 week then, she said. But Keller, why wait? She lifted her glass, and for a second the crystal trembled between her fingers, reflecting the chandelier lights like shards of broken promises. After all, she added, her voice silk over steel, blood never lies. But people do, especially the people you once chose over me. The party did not recover. The band started playing again, but no one really listened. Laughter resumed in fragments, strained and brittle. The guests smiled too wide, spoke too loudly, pretended too hard that nothing had happened. Vila stood near the balcony doors, watching the performance she had orchestrated. Outside, New York glittered under a sky of city lights. Inside, the Walker estate that had once felt like a cage now looked like a stage that she had set on fire. Nice entrance, a voice murmured at her side. She did not have to turn to know who it was. The cologne, the steady presence, the calm tone that always sounded like it could cut glass if he wanted it to. Evan Ross leaned on the railing beside her, hands in his pockets, expression relaxed. In his simple dark suit and loosened tie, he looked more like a bored guest than a private investigator who had just helped plant a bomb in the middle of a dynasty. Too much? Vila asked without looking at him. Just enough. Evan's lips curved. They will replay that scene in their heads for months, maybe years. She followed his gaze across the ballroom to where Keller and Isabella stood in a tight knot of family members and senior executives. Isabella kept touching Keller's sleeve, his shoulder, his back, her tears dripping like rain. Keller barely reacted. His face was drawn, his eyes distant. Even when he nodded, the motion seemed automatic. He looked like a man who had just discovered a crack in his own spine. You sent the photos? Vila asked. Already done, Evan said. His inbox, his private phone, his office email. all from an untraceable source. The photos had taken months to get. Isabella and her cousin Louis in the back room of a bar, too close, too intimate. Isabella's hands on his face, his hands on her waist. Another shot of them entering a hotel, her head on his shoulder. None of the images were explicit. They did not need to be. By tomorrow, Evan added. Those photos will be the first thing he sees when he wakes up. Vila nodded, her eyes never leaving Keller. He looked older than 30 in that moment. 3 years ago, he had stood on a similar stage with a different woman on his arm. He had looked down at Vila with a coldness that had frozen her blood. You are not suitable to be my wife. You drag me down. My uncle says your family is a burden. Sign the papers and leave. Be smart for once. She had been 24 then, still naive enough to believe that love could fix ambition. Still foolish enough to think that if she tried harder, he would choose her. She had been wrong. When the Heart group crashed and her father walked off a rooftop, rather than watch his name burn, Keller had not reached out. He had not questioned the forged documents that blamed the collapse on her father. He had taken over what remained of Heart assets with a clean legal smile. He had married Isabella 2 months later. Vila had watched the footage from a cheap motel room, the screen blurry with tears. Now, looking at him across the ballroom, she felt nothing but a cold, deep satisfaction. Do you ever regret it? Evan asked quietly. This road you chose. Vila thought about the motel, the grave, the years of clawing her way back from nothing with new names and new connections. She thought about the way her father had looked the last time she saw him, hollowed out, tired, still trying to protect her. I regret not starting sooner, she said. Evan huffed a laugh. Fair enough. A waiter approached with a tray. Vila took another glass of champagne, more for the gesture than the taste. What about you? She asked, turning to Evan now. 3 years of digging through trash, listening to lies, pretending to be a loyal employee to a man you would happily punch in the face. Any regrets? He considered this, eyes following Keller for a beat. Only that I did not punch him before I joined his company, Evan said. Now it would look unprofessional. Vila snorted. The sound made something in her chest loosen. Evan always did that. He could walk into a room full of ghosts and somehow make it easier to breathe. Keller will not trust you if you are always this honest, she said. He does not trust anyone, Evan replied. That is his weakness. He thinks he only suspects others, but actually he suspects himself the most. Vila tilted her head. You sound almost sympathetic. I am a professional, Evan said dryly. I analyze my subjects. I do not feel sorry for them. His gaze softened when he looked back at her. You know the real question, he added. What happens after the test? Vila's grip on her glass tightened. After the test. After the results. After the truth she already knew would be forced into the open. She had planned every step up to that moment. The whispers, the photos, the anonymous report, the public challenge, the demand for a test. But beyond that line, the landscape was a blur. She could see Keller's downfall. She could see Isabella's collapse. She could see Heart Group reborn from the ashes with a different board, a different CEO, a different future. What she could not see clearly was herself. After the test, she said slowly, we move the next piece. We pull on the thread that leads to Harvey Walker. We show who signed the fake audits, who moved the money, who pushed my father to the edge. And when you have all that? Evan asked. Vila took a breath. Then, she said, I decide how far I want their fall to go. Evan studied her face. He had known her since they were children in the same neighborhood, before the Heart fortune, before the Walker name. He had seen her laugh until she cried over cheap ice cream. He had seen her fight bullies twice her size. He had seen her cling to hope like a lifeline. The woman beside him now looked nothing like that girl, and exactly like her at the same time. You know I have your back, he said quietly. Whatever you decide. She looked at him then, really looked. Under the soft ballroom lights, his features were a little tired, a little worn, but steady. His eyes were clear. There was no judgment in them, only loyalty and a hint of something he had never named out loud. I know, she said. For a second, the noise of the ballroom faded. Vila felt the weight of the past 3 years settle on her shoulders and then shift, lighter, because she was not carrying it alone. Across the room, Keller finally escaped his family circle and stalked toward the bar. His shoulders were rigid. He ignored the executives who tried to talk to him. He downed one drink, then another. His gaze kept flicking to Louis, to Isabella, to Vila. It was starting. Good. Vila placed her empty glass on the tray and straightened. We should go, she said. He needs time to drown in his own doubts. Evan pushed off the railing. After you, Queen of Revenge. They walked out together, leaving the glittering cage behind, the quiet satisfaction of the first crack spreading through Vila's veins like a slow, dark warmth. By the time she reached the car, her phone vibrated. A new message. Unknown number. She opened it and saw a single sentence. You think you have won because you ruined my party. You forget who built this city. Harvey Walker. Vila's lips curled. Looks like the king finally noticed, she said. Evan glanced at the screen, then at her. He is bluffing. Of course he is. Vila agreed. But it is good. Let him feel threatened. Fear makes people sloppy. Sloppy people make mistakes. She slid into the back seat, the leather cool against her skin. Drive. She told the chauffeur. We have a long week ahead of us. As the car pulled away from the estate, Vila looked back one last time. In the tall windows of the ballroom, the figures of Keller and Isabella were small and distorted by the glass. For 3 years, they had held everything she once loved in their hands. Now, at last, she had touched the first stone in their foundation. Soon, she would pull the whole mansion down. The week that followed felt like a slow countdown. On the surface, the city moved as always. Traffic thick on Fifth Avenue, coffee shops filled every morning, stock tickers running across giant screens, headlines screaming about markets and politics. Underneath, whispers carried a different story. Isabella crying in the executive elevator. Keller leaving the office early with a face like stone. Harvey Walker yelling behind a closed boardroom door. Vila watched it all from a distance, then moved in closer. Each day had a task. On Monday, she had coffee with an old Heart Group director who had been forced into retirement after the so-called scandal. He was older now, his hair more white than gray, but his memory was sharp. They forged your father's signature, he said, bitterness rough in his voice. He tried to fight them. Harvey and his lawyers twisted everything. I still do not know how they got that audit report cleared. They did not get it cleared legally, Vila replied. They bought it. We just have to prove it. On Tuesday, Evan brought in an external forensic accountant to go over the documents they had quietly collected over the past year. Harvey's shell companies. Accounts that existed on paper but held nothing real. Transfers that led back to Walker Group instead of the vendors listed. Messy, the accountant said, shaking his head. He was arrogant. He thought no one would dig this deep. On Wednesday, news quietly dropped that Keller had postponed the official announcement of Lewis as the heir. No statement, no explanation, just an internal memo that somehow still found its way to gossip sites by afternoon. On Thursday, someone leaked a blurry photo of Isabella leaving a clinic with red eyes and swollen cheeks. The caption did not say why she was there, but speculation filled the gap. On Friday morning, Vila woke up to a message from Evangelist. He is breaking. She did not reply immediately. Instead, she showered, dressed, and watched herself in the mirror. The black suit she chose fit like armor. Her blouse was a deep red, the color of blood and power. She tied her hair back, leaving only a few strands loose around her face. The woman in the mirror looked like someone who could walk into hell and negotiate with the devil. Good. She would need that. At noon, she met Evan in a quiet restaurant that had been one of her father's favorites, before everything burned. He slid into the booth across from her, dropping a thick envelope on the table. Keller signed it, he said. Vila opened the envelope. Inside was a formal request for a comprehensive DNA test. Signed by Keller, authorized by the Walker Group legal team, witnessed by Harvey's legal advisor. He insisted on full confidentiality. Evan added. He does not want the board to know until he has something solid in his hands. He does not want Harvey to know either, Vila said softly. No, Evan agreed. But it is too late for that. Harvey knows everything. Vila flipped through the forms. Halfway through, she found a clause that had not been in the usual templates. In case of dispute, the parties may conduct additional non-standard verification methods, including, but not limited to blood compatibility testing, under the supervision of a third-party medical institution. Isabella pushed this one, Vila murmured. She wants the blood test. She thinks she can control it. Evan nodded. She met privately with one of the hospital doctors. I have phone records of their calls. She offered him money. He did not accept. But someone else will, Vila said. Harvey has used that hospital for years. He has men everywhere. Evan looked at her. You are sure you want to go along with the blood test show? Vila closed the folder. I do not care what method they use, she said. Because we hold the real test. And we hold the doctor who will not lie. Evan's lips curled. Speaking of which, he said. Dr. Lane sends his regards. Dr. Lane was the delivery room physician who had broken under Evan's pressure 2 months ago and admitted what he had seen the night Lewis was born. 2 infants, one healthy, one not. A hurried conversation in the hallway. Harvey's driver bringing in a woman with a crying newborn. A nurse carrying one baby out of the room and returning with another. At the time, Dr. Lane had tried to pretend that his memory was foggy. Money and threats had turned his silence into a wall. But walls fell when you hit them enough times. Now, with evidence stacked against Harvey, Dr. Lane had quietly agreed to testify, in his own way. "We are ready," Vila said. "All we need is the stage." Evan leaned back. "You have that too," he said. Walker Group and Harvey both agreed to hold the blood test in the Walker Estate Hall, with media present. "They think they will prove you wrong in front of the whole city." Vila smiled slowly. "Perfect." He watched her for a moment, then asked, "And the part about the life and death note?" She raised her brows. "You think I should not push it?" "I think it is risky," he said. "You want Isabella to sign a paper promising to give up everything if the child is not Keller's. But you also promise to leave New York forever if he is. That is a heavy bet." "I am not gambling," Vila replied. "I am just dressing the truth in drama. Isabella believes she has control. She will jump at the chance to play the victim in front of the cameras." Evan did not argue. He had learned this about Vila over the years. Once she made a decision, she rarely turned back. "Just remember," he said quietly, "you do not have to disappear even if the result is not what we expect." Vila frowned at him. "We know the result," she said. "Yes," Evan replied. "But the world is full of people who know the result and still get hit in the face by something else. That is why I am cautious." She exhaled, tension slowly leaving her shoulders. "You worry too much," she said. "That is my job," he answered. "I worry so you can burn the world down without looking over your shoulder every second." The corners of her mouth twitched. "In that case," she said, "keep worrying. We have a lot of world left to burn." The day of the test arrived faster than the week deserved. The Walker Estate Hall was transformed again, not for a celebration now, but for a public trial disguised as a medical procedure. Cameras lined the back wall. Reporters adjusted their microphones. The Walker family elders sat in a row like judges in some old court, their faces heavy and serious. Harvey sat in the center, his expression carved from stone. His hair was silver, his suit a perfect dark blue. His eyes were sharp, calculating every movement in the room. Keller stood beside him, his jaw clenched. Isabella, dressed in a modest cream dress this time, cradled Lewis in her arms. She had dark circles under her eyes, her lipstick smudged, her fingers shaking. Vila entered with a straight back and steady steps. The air seemed to dip in temperature. Some reporters lifted their cameras higher, others murmured her name. She had spent 3 years buried. Now, every move she made drew attention like gravity. Keller's gaze locked onto her. He looked tired, desperate. "Vila," he said, low enough that only she could hear as she reached the front. "If you are lying, I will destroy you." She met his eyes. "If I am lying," she answered, "you will not have to destroy me. I will walk out of this city myself." She reached into her bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "This," she said loudly, letting her voice carry, "is a written agreement. Isabella, I propose we sign it before the test. If Lewis is proven to be Keller's son, I will leave New York and never claim anything from Walker Group. If he is not, you will give up all assets taken from Hart and Walker, leave this estate, and publicly apologize for your deception." Gasps ran through the hall. Isabella's mouth fell open. "You are crazy," she cried. "I will not sign something like that. Why should I gamble my life on your vicious rumors?" Vila smiled. "Because you have nothing to fear, right?" she said. "You keep saying Lewis is Keller's child. If that is true, this paper protects you and forces me to disappear. Surely that is worth one signature." She turned to the elders. "After all," she added, "should the future of Walker Group not be secured with absolute clarity?" Several elders exchanged looks. Harvey's brows drew together. He could see the trap, but he could also see the optics. If Isabella refused, she would look guilty. If he forced her to sign, he risked losing everything if the test failed. But Harvey had built his life on the belief that he could control every variable. He did not know yet that there was one variable he had miscalculated: Vila Hart. Finally, he smiled, a tight, practiced expression. "Sign it," he told Isabella. She stared at him, stunned. "Uncle Harvey, sign it," he repeated. You are innocent. We have nothing to fear. His eyes flicked to Vila with a silent dare. Vila held his gaze and laid a second pen on the table. Isabella's hands trembled as she took the first pen. For 1 second, Vila almost thought the woman would drop it and run. But pride was a powerful leash. Isabella straightened her shoulders, wiped her cheeks, and scrawled her name on the paper. Vila signed next. The agreement looked thin and fragile. But everyone in the room understood that this single sheet could end lives. The doctor from the hospital stepped forward, accompanied by nurses. We will begin the blood compatibility test first, he announced. Vila felt Evan's presence at the back of the hall, steady like a quiet anchor. She took a breath, tasting the metallic edge of anticipation on her tongue. Paper and blood. Promises and DNA. This was the heart of her plan. Now all that remained was to watch it beat. The hall smelled faintly of disinfectant and fear. The doctor arranged 3 small glass dishes on a tray, along with sterile lancets and cotton swabs. The cameras zoomed in. Reporters leaned forward, hungry for drama. This is a basic blood compatibility observation, the doctor explained for the crowd. It is not a full DNA test, but it can indicate whether a parent and child share certain traits. We will also be conducting a formal DNA analysis. The results of that will be provided in writing later. For now, you will see a preliminary indication. Harvey nodded, playing the wise elder. Transparency is important, he said. We have nothing to hide. Vila almost laughed. Everything about this man was a lie. Keller sat on a chair at the front, rolling up his sleeve. His arm was tense, veins standing out against his skin. The nurse tied a rubber band around his upper arm and swabbed the inner elbow. Make a fist, please, she said. He obeyed without a word. The needle slid in. Red filled the vial. The nurse placed a few drops of his blood in the first dish. Vila watched his face. He did not flinch. When the nurse moved on to Isabella, the woman tried to smile at the cameras. It came out twisted and thin. She bared her finger for the lancet, sucking in a breath as the small blade pricked her skin. A bright bead of blood formed, then fell into the second dish. Finally, they turned to Louis. The child clung to Isabella's neck, eyes wide and damp. Baby, it is all right, she whispered. It will not hurt much. It is just like a small mosquito bite. He shook his head, lower lip trembling. Vila watched the scene with a strange detachment. She did not hate the child. He was a pawn, just as she had been once. A tool used by adults who wanted power more than they wanted truth. The nurse knelt in front of Louis and offered him a candy. If you are brave, she said gently, you get a treat after. Louis sniffled and finally nodded. He held out his small hand. The lancet clicked. A drop of his blood fell into the third dish. The doctor lifted the tray with careful hands. He added a clear reagent, then took a thin glass rod and touched the drops together pair by pair in a larger dish. Keller's blood, Louis's blood. A single drop from each, brought close, then merged into the shallow pool. The hall held its breath. Vila's heart did not race. She had done this before, in private, with a doctor she trusted. She knew what would happen. She watched the surface of the blood mixture with unreadable eyes. For a second, nothing changed. Then, slowly, the edges of the 2 drops curled away from each other. The mixture separated into 2 distinct zones, like oil pulling back from water. A murmur swept through the hall. What does that mean? Should it not mix? Is that bad? The doctor cleared his throat. This indicates an incompatibility, he said carefully. It suggests that they may not share a direct bloodline. The words hit like a bomb. Isabella lurched to her feet. Liar, she screamed. You are lying. Do it again. You did it wrong. You must have done it wrong. Harvey's face darkened. Doctor, he said, his voice controlled. Are you certain? This is a very serious matter. The doctor swallowed hard. His hands were steady, but Vila could see the sweat at his temples. He was one of Harvey's people, paid to control the show. But someone else stood near the equipment. Dr. Lane, Vila's ally. The quiet man stepped forward now, holding a sealed envelope. If I may, he said, voice calm but firm. These are the results of the confidential DNA test that was performed earlier this week, using samples from Mr. Keller Walker and the child Louis White. He looked at Keller. Do I have your permission to present the results? Keller's throat worked. He looked at Isabella. She was shaking her head over and over, lips moving soundlessly. He looked at Louis, who clung to her skirt, confused and scared. He looked at Vila. She met his gaze with unflinching calm. Yes, he said. Read it. Dr. Lane broke the seal and unfolded the paper. For a moment, The only sound in the hall was the soft crackle of the document. He cleared his throat. Based on the genetic markers analyzed, he read, the probability that Mr. Keller Walker is the biological father of Lewis White is less than 0.1%. The conclusion is that there is no parent-child relationship. Silence fell again, colder than before. Then everything happened at once. Reporters shouted. Cameras flashed in violent bursts of light. One of the elders stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. What kind of sick joke is this? Another cried. Harvey, what have you allowed to happen in our family? Isabella screamed. She did not cry this time. She shrieked like a trapped animal, throwing herself at the doctor, at Vila, at Keller. You monsters! You planned this. You framed me. You bought that doctor. You faked the test. She clawed at the paper in Dr. Lane's hand. He stepped back, face pale but resolute. There are copies, he said. Keller grabbed Isabella by the shoulders and shook her. Tell me the truth, he snarled. Is he my son or not? Tell me now. Isabella stared at him, chest heaving. For one wild second, Vila thought she might lie again, even with everything around her collapsing. But fear had stripped away her mask. No, she whispered, the word torn from her. He is not. He never was. Keller's hands fell from her shoulders as if he had been burned. The elders roared. Harvey's carefully constructed composure cracked. He surged to his feet. Enough, he barked. This circus ends now. Isabella made a mistake. A foolish, desperate mistake. She acted alone. The child will be cared for, but we cannot let this scandal destroy the company. Vila stepped forward. Alone? She repeated quietly. Is that the story you are going with? Harvey glared at her. You are not part of this family. You have no right to speak here. But my father was part of this family's empire, Vila replied. He trusted you. He believed your partnership would save Heart Group. Instead, he lost his company, his name, his life. She took a remote from her pocket and pressed a button. The giant screen at the back of the hall flickered and lit up. Emails, bank records, scans of forged audit reports. The room filled with glowing proof. This is everything you did, Harvey, Vila said. The accounts you used to siphon funds from Heart Group. The false transactions you hid in Walker Group's books. The forged signatures. The shell companies. It took me 3 years, but I finally gathered it all. Harvey stared at the screen, his face going from red to a dangerous gray. You cannot prove those are real. He spat. Anyone can make fake documents. True, Vila said. That is why I also brought the people who helped you make them. The doors at the back opened. Several men walked in, flanked by officers in plain clothes. An old accountant with shaking hands, a former assistant from Harvey's private office, a junior lawyer who had disappeared right after the Hart scandal. Each of them carried their own stack of papers. Officer badges glinted briefly as they moved. Harvey Walker, a woman's voice said, firm and official. We have reason to believe you are involved in financial fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to falsify corporate records that led to the collapse of Heart Group. You are under investigation. Please come with us. The hall froze yet again. If the earlier silence had been shock, this one was awe. They were watching a king dragged off his throne. Harvey laughed, a short, ugly sound. You think you can tear me down with this little performance? He sneered. I built Walker Group. I built this family. You built it on blood and lies, Vila said. I am just turning on the lights. For the first time, fear flickered in Harvey's eyes. It was quick, almost invisible, but Vila saw it. The officers moved in, taking his arms. He did not fight. He walked out with a stiff back, each step echoing like the fall of a tower. Isabella collapsed to her knees. Lewis cried harder, lost and terrified. Keller stood in the center of the chaos, surrounded by flashing cameras and shouting relatives, and looked like a man who had woken up in the wreckage of an earthquake. His gaze found Vila. You did this, he said hoarsely. Yes, Vila answered. You helped. His laugh was bitter. Helped. You doubted. She said simply. You signed the test papers. You agreed to this public show. You were the one who wanted the truth. I just gave you the tools. He stared at her. You wanted to see me fall. He said. Is this enough for you? Not yet. She replied. There was still the matter of Heart Group's stolen assets. Still the matter of her father's name. Still the matter of the man who had watched her suffer and done nothing. Do you hate me that much? He asked, voice breaking. Did you ever love me at all? It was a question that might have once gutted her. Now, it just sounded small. I loved the man I thought you were, Vila said. That man never existed. You killed him yourself. She turned away from him and walked toward the exit. Behind her, the hall seethed with fallout. Ahead of her, Evan waited in the doorway, his eyes steady, his body between her and the flashing cameras. She joined him without slowing. "How do you feel?" he asked quietly as they stepped into the cool corridor. "Like I just cut out a tumor," she said. "It hurts less than I expected." He nodded. "Harvey is gone," he reminded her. "But Keller is still standing." "I know," she said. "Do not worry. I am not done with him yet." She lifted her chin. There was another agreement still waiting. Another piece on the board. She had promised to take everything he had taken from her. That included more than money. It included dignity, and she knew exactly how to strip it away. The news broke fast. By evening, every major financial channel and gossip site in the city carried some version of the same story. Walker heir exposed as false. Harvey Walker under investigation. Secret child not related by blood. Heart scandal back in the spotlight. Comment sections burned with accusations and jokes. Old videos of Keller's wedding to Isabella resurfaced, spliced together with today's footage of Isabella screaming and Harvey being escorted away. Memes appeared within hours. Keller turned off his phone. Then he threw it against the wall. The device shattered, pieces skidding across the floor of his office. It did not make him feel better. Nothing did. He stood with his hands braced on his desk, breathing hard, staring at the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows. It used to make him feel powerful, this view. Now it just felt like 1,000 eyes watching him. There was a knock on the door. "Get out," he snapped. "It is me," a familiar voice said. "We need to talk." Keller closed his eyes briefly. "Come in, Vila," he said. The door opened. She stepped inside with that same calm he had grown to hate over the past week. She moved like she owned the ground she walked on. Maybe she did now. "The board just voted," she said, closing the door behind her. "You are out." He let out a short, bitter laugh. "Of course," he said. "They need someone to blame. Harvey is gone, so that leaves me." "It leaves the man who put his signature under every decision he did not bother to read," Vila replied. "You were not just blind. You were lazy." He turned on her, eyes bloodshot. "You think you are so pure?" he shouted. "You think you are better than me? You were happy to enjoy heart money when your father was still alive. You never questioned where all that luxury came from. Now you act like a saint because you lost it." The words hit, but not as deeply as they might have once. "I was young," she said quietly. "I trusted my father. I did not know the game you and Harvey were playing over his head. But I learned. That is the difference between us. I learned." He laughed again, harsher. "You learned how to destroy me," he said. "Congratulations. You did an excellent job." He grabbed a folder from his desk and threw it toward her. It slid to a stop near her heels. "That is the agreement you shoved in my face," he said. "You win. I will sign it. Heart assets go back to you. Walker shares go back to the family. I leave with nothing. Is that not what you want?" Vila looked down at the folder, but did not pick it up yet. "You sound like you are offering me a gift," she said. "Keller, these things were mine before they were yours. You are not generous. You are just returning stolen property." His jaw clenched. "You could have come to me quietly," he said. "You could have shown me the truth without turning my life into a public execution. I would have handled Harvey. I would have made it right." She stared at him, stunned for a second by the sheer arrogance of his delusion. "You had 3 years," she said, voice low. 3 years to ask what really happened to Hart. 3 years to wonder if your uncle was too eager to blame my father. 3 years to pick up a phone and call me. You did nothing." He opened his mouth, then closed it. She stepped closer. "You were not tricked into this," she said. "You chose it. You chose your ambition. You chose Harvey. You chose Isabella. You chose to believe that I was holding you back. You chose to watch while the man I loved more than anything was destroyed." Her eyes burned, but no tears fell. "I begged you," she whispered. "Do you remember? I begged you to look at the numbers again. I told you something was wrong. You told me I was hysterical, that I was embarrassing you in front of your uncle. You asked for a wife who knew when to stay silent." He flinched. He remembered. He remembered the way she had clutched the file in her shaking hands, the way her voice had broken, the way he had felt embarrassed and annoyed. "We were young," he said weakly. "We were old enough to know the difference between right and wrong." She answered. "You just did not care." He sank into his chair, the fight draining out of him. "I cared about you," he said hoarsely. "I loved you." "No," she said. "You loved the idea of me. The pretty wife from a wealthy family, the stepping stone to bigger deals. When I became inconvenient, you traded me for a woman who worshipped you and an uncle who promised you the world. He stared at the floor. Silence stretched between them. After a long moment, she picked up the folder and opened it. The document was exactly as she had drafted. Keller Walker hereby agrees to transfer all Heart Group assets acquired by Walker Group back to Heart Holdings, under the management of Vila Hart. He also agrees to resign from all positions within Walker Group, and waive any claims to future inheritance from the Walker family estate. Her eyes scanned the lines. She paused on the last paragraph. He had added something. In handwritten script at the bottom, Keller had written, "I acknowledge that my actions contributed to the downfall of Heart Group, and to the death of its founder. I accept full responsibility and apologize publicly to Vila Hart." Her chest tightened. "You did not have to add this," she said. "Yes, I did," he replied without looking up. "It is the only thing I can give you that you do not already have. The truth in my own words." She studied his face, searching for a trace of manipulation. There was none. He looked broken. But broken was not the same as innocent. She took the pen from the desk and placed it in front of him. "Sign," she said. He did. The scribble of ink sounded louder than the traffic outside. When he was done, he pushed the paper back to her with a shaking hand. "There," he said. "Now you have everything. Heart Group, your father's name, my career. Are you happy?" She folded the paper and slipped it into her bag. "Happiness is a luxury," she said. "What I feel is something else." He laughed without humor. "I do not expect you to forgive me," he said. "I know I do not deserve it. I needed you to know that I was not always this man." Her expression did not soften. "You were always this man," she said quietly. "You just finally saw yourself clearly." She turned to leave. "Vila," he called after her. She stopped but did not look back. "Do you ever miss what we had?" he asked. "The nights when we stayed up planning our future. The stupid fights about nothing. The way you used to fall asleep on the couch while I worked, and I would carry you to bed." She closed her eyes. Memory was cruel. "Yes," she said. He sucked in a breath. "But I miss who I thought you were," she added. "Not who you turned out to be." She left then, closing the door softly behind her. The sound echoed through his office like the final click of a lock. On the street outside, the sky was bright and cold. Vila walked slowly, feeling the weight of the signed document in her bag. One piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Heart Group was coming home. Her father's name would be cleared in court. Harvey would likely spend the rest of his life fighting charges. Isabella had already been thrown out of the estate. The family driver had packed her things into cheap suitcases and left them on the curb outside a small hotel. The media had followed, of course. There were photos of her on the front steps, mascara streaked, hair a mess, clutching Louis as if the child were the last thread tying her to a life that had spit her out. Vila felt no satisfaction when she saw those images, only a numb acceptance. "What now?" Evan asked that evening, as they sat on the roof of her apartment building, sharing takeout from a cardboard box. "Now I rebuild," she said simply. "Heart Group will not just exist again, it will thrive." He nodded. "You have investors lining up," he said. "After everything that came out today, people are treating you like some kind of avenging angel of corporate justice." She snorted. "That sounds dramatic." "It fits," he said. They looked at the city together. Lights blinked on and off in towers that once felt unreachable. Now, Vila could almost see her future logo glowing among them. "You know what nobody is asking?" she said after a while. "What? What happens to Louis?" she said. "His whole life they told him he was a prince. Today he found out he is just a child with no place in that house." Evan considered this. "Maybe that is a good thing," he said. "Being raised by Harvey and Isabella would have made him into another weapon. Now he has a chance to be something else. If the system does not chew him up first." Vila murmured. "You cannot save everyone," Evan said gently. "I know," she replied. "I do not even want to, but he is innocent." She thought of the boy's frightened eyes, his small hands, his confusion. Maybe she hated Isabella. Maybe she despised Keller. But the child. "I made sure social services were notified," Evan said quietly. "And the hospital records of his real birth family are being tracked. He will not vanish into the cracks." She looked at him, surprised. "You did that on your own?" she asked. He shrugged. "Someone has to be the decent one in this story." She smiled, small but real. "If you ever get tired of being a private investigator," she said, "you could run for office. I prefer jobs where I can occasionally break the rules, he said, and threaten bad guys with creative words. She laughed softly. The sound felt strange in her throat, lighter than it had in years. You did it, Vila, Evan said. You took them down. You took back what was yours. She looked at him, at the city, at the folder between them. I know, she said. So why does it feel like there is still something unfinished? Because you have been living for revenge, he answered. Now you have to learn how to live for yourself again. The idea was terrifying. For 3 years, every choice she made had been connected to this goal. Every morning, she woke up with a list of things to do to destroy the people who had destroyed her. Every night, she fell asleep with new plans forming in her mind. What did a day look like without that? She did not know. But for the first time, she was willing to find out. A year later, the city looked different. Or maybe Vila did. Heart Group's new headquarters sat in a sleek glass tower in Midtown, the logo shining clean and bright against the sky. The company had shifted from its old business model to a more modern portfolio, focusing on sustainable infrastructure and community projects. Her father had always wanted to build something that lasted. Now, at last, his name was attached to something that felt worthy. The court had officially cleared him of wrongdoing. The judge's statement was precise and unforgiving when it came to Harvey. Evidence shows that Heart Group's collapse was engineered through fraud and conspiracy, the ruling had said. The late Mr. Hart is hereby absolved of all charges that stained his reputation. Vila had sat in the courtroom, hands folded, listening. She had not cried. The tears had come later, alone in her car, when there were no cameras, no reporters, no enemies to see. Harvey was serving a long sentence. His appeals kept failing. Isabella had disappeared from the gossip columns after a few months of scandal. Vila heard rumors of her working in a small diner in another state, dragging Louis from one cheap apartment to another. She did not look for them. She told herself it was enough that Louis was away from the Walker estate, away from Harvey's shadow. Keller had vanished from the front pages too. He sold his smaller properties, kept a low profile, and left the city for a while. Now and then his name popped up in minor business articles, attached to consulting roles or small start UPS. He was still alive. He was still out there, but he no longer cast a shadow over her days. Today, the Heart Building lobby buzzed with preparations. Flowers, lights, a stage. The company was celebrating its official relaunch, now that the legal battles were over. The media had been invited. Investors were flying in. Employees were excited, proud to work for a name that had risen from ashes. Vila stood in front of a mirror in her private floor suite, adjusting the strap of her deep red dress. She did not wear black today. She had spent enough years wrapped in mourning colors. Her reflection showed a woman with calm eyes and a soft, steady mouth. There were faint lines at the corners of her eyes now, born from late nights and relentless focus, but they suited her. They made her look real. There was a knock at the door. Come in, she called. Evan stepped inside, holding 2 champagne flutes. It is time, he said. She took one glass, fingers brushing his. Are you nervous? He asked. Less than I expected, she replied. I am terrified, he said dryly. If you trip on that stage, I will laugh, and then you will fire me. She smiled. I would never fire you for laughing, she said. Only for bad coffee. I make excellent coffee, he protested. That is why you still have a job, she answered. They walked out together, through the corridor lined with framed photos of her father, of old Heart projects, of new ones under construction. The stage in the lobby had been set in front of a tall glass wall. Outside, the city pulsed. Inside, hundreds of faces turned as she stepped up to the microphone. Cameras clicked. Phones rose. Her heart beat calmly. Thank you for being here, she began. Her voice sounded steady, even to her own ears. 3 years ago, Heart Group was a name associated with scandal. My father was blamed for crimes he did not commit. I lost my family, my home, and my place in this city. She paused, letting the weight of the words settle. Today, we stand here with the truth acknowledged. The people who engineered that fall have been judged. The man who built this name has been cleared. Heart Group is not just back. It is better. Applause rippled through the hall. She lifted her chin. We will build responsibly, she continued. We will invest in projects that actually improve the lives of the people who live in this city. We will not chase profit at any cost. We have already signed our first partnership with community centers in the boroughs, and we are launching a scholarship in my father's name next year. More applause. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Evan at the edge of the crowd, watching her with that familiar, steady look. She felt her chest warm. Once, she said, I believed that power meant never having to answer for your choices. I saw men who thought they were untouchable, who used others like disposable tools. I built my life around making them pay. She let out a slow breath. I did it, she said simply. They paid. But revenge is not a home. It is a road. At some point, you have to decide where you actually want to live. The room was silent. She smiled, small and real. I want to live here, she finished. In a place where my father's name stands for integrity again. In a company that does not forget the cost of its success. And in a life that is not defined by the people who hurt me, but by the people who stayed. Her gaze found Evan again. For everyone who believed in me when I did not even believe in myself. She said, thank you. This company is as much yours as it is mine. The applause that followed was loud and sustained. When the speeches were over, the music started and people mingled. Investors cornered her. Employees congratulated her. Reporters asked questions. She answered, smiled, shook hands. Hours later, when the crowd had thinned and the staff were cleaning up, she slipped out to the rooftop terrace. The air was cooler up there. The city spread out below like a galaxy of human stars. She leaned on the railing, letting the noise fade. You did not fall, Evan's voice said behind her. She turned. He walked over, hands in his pockets, tie loosened. I told you I was not that nervous, she said. I meant in general, he replied. With everything. You had every reason to break. You did not. She looked back at the skyline. Sometimes I think I did break, she said softly. I just kept walking with the pieces. He moved to stand beside her. Maybe that is all any of us do, he said. Keep walking with the pieces until they start to fit together again. She glanced at him. You are unusually poetic tonight, she remarked. Blame the champagne, he said. It makes me say honest things. Like what? She asked. He hesitated. Then he said. Like the fact that I am still here because I want to be. Not because I feel responsible. Not because of some old childhood loyalty. But because when I imagine my future, you are in it. Her heart skipped. Evan, she said quietly. You do not have to answer, he added quickly. I know you are still healing. I know that your life has been about battles and courtrooms and boardrooms for a long time. I am not asking you to rush. I am just putting the truth on the table. She studied his face, the familiar lines, the worry that had lived there for years and softened slowly as her life changed. I spent 3 years wanting one thing, she said. Vengeance. Then I spent another year rebuilding. I never really thought about anything else. Maybe it is time to start, he said. She thought of Keller then, for the first time in days. Of his broken voice in that office. Of the apology he had written at the bottom of the document. She did not feel the old rage. She did not feel forgiveness either. She just felt distance. Like a story she had read long ago. If I say yes, she asked. Are you ready for the fact that I am still learning how to live without a war to fight? He smiled. I have walked beside you through a war, he said. Peace sounds like a good challenge. A small laugh escaped her. You and your challenges, she said. He stepped closer, not touching her yet, giving her room to decide. She looked at the city, at the tower with the heart name glowing at the top, at the road that had brought her here, at the ashes she had left behind, at the sunrise that was finally hers. She turned back to him. Yes, she said. His eyes widened a little, then softened. Yeah? He asked, just to be sure. Yes, she repeated, smiling fully now. Stay. Walk into this next part with me. Not as my shadow, as my equal. He let out a breath that sounded like relief and laughter all at once. I can work with equal, he said. Even if you are the scary one in meetings. She laughed. He reached out and took her hand, slow and careful. Their fingers intertwined with surprising ease. They stood like that for a while, hand in hand, looking at the city they had both fought and bled for in different ways. Below them, people moved through their own stories. Above them, the sky was clear. No storms. No thunder. Just a quiet, endless expanse. Vila Hart, once a fallen heiress, once a woman with nothing but anger keeping her alive, closed her eyes for a moment and breathed. For the first time, the air did not taste like smoke. It tasted like possibility.
Thanks for watching. Follow for more romance stories.